All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for Physical and Occupational Therapy and the ALS diagnosis. We're joined by Kristen and Teresa today to talk through the role of these in the clinic environment and give you an overview of what all this involves. So a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you are joining us from a desktop device or a computer, you will probably see 3 or 4 boxes in the side of your screen. The best way to view this is going to be in active speaker mode. So you're going to want to scroll your cursor over those boxes, and you're going to see at the top a dash, a single box, 2 boxes, and a grid. You're going to want to click on the single box. That's going to be show small active speaker video. That will enable you to see both the active speaker, our presenter, and the screen at the same time. And then once we once we get to Teresa's portion, it's just going to be her. So that will enable you to just see her as she's presenting. At the end of each of these sections, I believe we will have some Q&A, but also please feel free to drop in any questions you may have during the presentation in the chat box. I'm going to type something right here in case you don't know where to find it. Here is the chat box. We can make sure that our presenters know anytime there are any questions in here at certain points, and see if they're able to answer those questions for you, or we can save those till Q&A. So again, if you have any questions or anything, please feel free to type them in that chat box and we can address those throughout the presentation. We are recording this and we'll be providing this to you afterwards as well for your reference. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started, and please welcome Kristen, I believe, to start us out with physical therapy and the ALS diagnosis.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kristen Kadershaw. I'm a physical therapist that has been at Dr. Heitzman's clinic at Texas Neurology in Dallas for about 15 years, and I've been a PT for 25 years in rehab. So I have loved just the opportunity to be involved with the clinic and just get to use my knowledge to help families and patients out. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of kind of what our role is in clinic, and it is different. Every clinic kind of finesses things depending on their therapists and the way they run clinic. So this is kind of the way we do it. I will allude to maybe other ways that other clinics do it as we go. No, okay, hang on one second. There we go. All right, so my role in the clinic is to discuss mobility needs. And so this, we'll talk more in detail on the next slide. We also are fall prevention, so always trying to be proactive in that area. I discuss range of motion, stretching, exercise, equipment, various kinds of equipment, and I will show you kind of some of the things that we recommend in our clinic. I help out with any referrals, whether to home health or outpatient, prescriptions for equipment and those types of things. And then when possible, caregiver training. A lot of this is either just kind of describing things, or I have sent videos either that are YouTube or found on the internet, or ones that we have created just to help caregivers understand transfers and things like that. So under mobility, first time somebody comes into clinic, depending on kind of how they are affected with the ALS, we'll assess walking. So a manual muscle test is included in this, frequently a kind of a shortened balance test. I will a lot of times watch people walk in to save your energy rather than having you do multiple walks around the clinic. Would just kind of, when possible, watch as you walk from one place to another to see different clinicians. And we will talk about assistive devices, possibly bracing. Another thing that kind of comes into play as we talk about equipment and walking is if you've got upper extremity weakness, that changes the items that you can use. Sometimes if your arms are much weaker and you can no longer either catch yourself to keep your balance, or or even break a fall, then sometimes we have to skip from using a walker to going straight to a power chair, just to allow you to be safe and independent. We also will discuss with a respiratory therapist and look at their measurements to see if your breathing is what limits your mobility. And so just all of those things, and then also fatigue, just go into us figuring out what your best mode of mobility is. So under mobility also is transfers. So if you are, maybe you're still able to stand and somebody can help you get from your bed to your chair. And so just helping people figure out, as things get more difficult, what the best mode is for you and your caregivers to help transfer. And then the last kind of category under mobility is just power mobility. So once you are unable to walk or unable to walk distances, figuring out what your best option is for some type of power mobility. So when we talk, as PTs, talk about bracing, this, again, like none of these things I'm showing you are prescriptive. I wouldn't tell you to go out and buy any of these, but these are suggestions. And so if you go to clinic or you're going to see your physician and you are having difficulty with walking because of ankle weakness, then these might be some options to ask them about. The one there, top left of your screen, is kind of your standard, what we call AFO, or ankle foot orthosis. So if your ankle is completely weak, this might be something that we would recommend. It goes inside your shoe. These are usually used temporarily. They're a little bit cumbersome, difficult to put on, and most people don't really like them. So it's usually a suggestion if they want to try something like this. There are custom AFOs, and that's something you would get a prescription for. That would be something that you would discuss with your physician and your PT as well. The one in the bottom middle of the screen is a little less cumbersome, and kind of what I have recommended more recently as just kind of an easy protection to help. So if you are finding you have what we call foot drop, then this is something, and again, these are off Amazon, all of these, I just took these links off Amazon, and they are linked in a handout that we would send to you after the presentation here. And then top right screen is what we call a rollator. So a little different from your standard walker, but gives you independence and mobility, kind of a place to rest. If you're out at the grocery store or the mall and you know that you'll get fatigued, it gives you a place to kind of take a break. Some people use this in their home to get through narrow doorways instead of having to use a wheelchair. Patient can sit on it. Not recommended all the time, but it is an option sometimes.
Kristen, we have a quick question from someone.
Yes.
What do you recommend for barefoot walkers?
So that picture that I just showed you in the middle actually has an adaptation so that you can use it as a barefoot walker. So that is an option. Okay, fall prevention. So you want to be proactive and preventative. And so part of that is knowing kind of what your limitations are. I find that some people are stubborn. I'm sure that's nobody that's here listening today. But just being aware that like independence is really important, and that's our goal, is that you be as independent as possible. But a fall can result in much more challenging problems. So you end up with a trip to the emergency room or a broken bone or stitches or staples or whatever. And so just always emphasizing that you may not feel like you need a device all the time, but you need to be aware what your limitations are as things change. And using a device, a lot of times we'll recommend, hey, at the end of the day, when you know you've been busy or you've just used up a lot of energy, then that would be a time that maybe you use your cane or your rollator in the house just to prevent some kind of injury. And then also just taking rest. So not pushing yourself to the point that you're going to risk an injury. I like to tell people just to make things simple and clean. And so when you look around your house, just look at the thresholds. You know, if you walking into your home, you've got kind of most standard houses have, you know, a 3-inch kind of brick to step up. And so at some point, how would you make that a smoother transition? I'll show you a few items here towards the end. Making sure that any throw rugs are either really secured on the edges or pulling them up, just so you're not gonna accidentally catch a toe on them. Any other transitions, sometimes where tile or hardwood goes to carpet, making sure those are secured down as well. And then our pets, sometimes when you know you're a little unsteady or you've got some leg weakness, that sweet, energetic puppy dog that goes running through the room may be the cause of a fall. And so just making sure that as you get up to move around the house, that you just know where your pets are and that they're not going to be the cause of a fall as well. Exercise and range of motion. This is always one of the first questions people ask when they come to clinic. And the answer has, I mean, literally for 15 years, been very gray. And so exercise, I'm actually just kind of trying to catch up on current research. And there's a lot of research. It is, you know, one of the, other than the cure for ALS, I think that exercise is one of the most researched parts of ALS. And the answer is not clear, honestly. And so a lot of times we will tell people, first time they come to clinic, if you were somebody that was training for marathons or working out at the gym, and those things kind of were what you kind of based your life around or brought you, you know, a lot of joy and energy, and you can still do those, it's okay to keep doing what you can do. In that, you need to be monitoring what you're doing. And so if you go and you work out and then you can't get out of bed the next morning to do your daily activities, then you need to evaluate what life looks like and whether that's a wise choice. That being said, research does show that we don't want to do anything that we call as eccentric, so nothing where you're going to do like a wall squat, where you're going to squat and hold a muscle contraction for an extended period of time. You also don't want to do a lot of resistive activity, especially in an affected muscle area. And so most of the exercises that I give are more along the lines of range of motion. So if you still have the strength to lift your legs and straighten your knees, then I would give you a set of recommended, basically a range of motion exercise plan. And then in addition to that, if you're not able to, and even when you still are, stretching is really important. And this is to keep your joints and your muscles moving through their full range, not getting tightened up. This is a way to prevent pain in the future. It also helps to make just moving around, getting dressed, kind of all of your ADLs and mobility. It just allows you to continue to be able to do those things with much greater ease. And so those range of motion and stretches may be things that you can do on your own to start with. And then as the disease progresses, it may be something that somebody does for you. All right, and then equipment is another area that this is really kind of the last thing on here I said was a team approach. And so OTs have a lot to do with equipment, PTs have a lot of recommendations, and then your vendor, or as we call him in our clinic, the equipment guy, also recommends a lot of things and can speak into what kind of the next best piece of equipment might be for you. When I've got somebody new to clinic, I try and give kind of what I call the 30,000 foot perspective. So first time in clinic is like kind of drinking from a fire hydrant. And so you're getting a lot of information from a lot of people, and we don't want to overwhelm you. We know that kind of each piece of equipment is giving up a little bit of independence. And so for some people, they want to take baby steps, and that's completely fine. And then other people want to know what the end product is that they need, and they want it as soon as possible. And so just in order to keep everybody just educated, make sure that we are using your resources well, whether that's insurance, Medicare, your personal finances. And then also just realizing that most of the equipment, at least from a PT perspective, it takes time to get it. So a lot of times it requires a referral or an evaluation from a PT or an OT. It requires a vendor to measure and spec out things. And then a lot of these items are made just for you, personalized. And so it takes time to have them actually manufactured and then even delivered. And so things like power wheelchairs, that can take up to 2 months, sometimes longer, depending on who you're working with and some of the other limitations. So giving the big picture, a lot of times will just help people understand what the end goal is sometimes. So these are a couple of the things that we will prescribe or recommend. Right top corner is what we call a transport chair. It is kind of the first thing, you know, if you're going to go to a football game, but you know you're not going to want to walk from one end of the stadium to the other, or if you're going to go to the mall, this is something that folds up, very lightweight, can go in the back of your car. Caregiver could get it out and they would push you wherever you need to go. Again, even with something like this, there are different recommendations depending on what your limitations are. And so just talking with your therapist, with the vendor, or with your OT is the best idea. Below that is what we call a threshold ramp. And so you can get these in different sizes, again, off Amazon. But this is helpful. You know, if you're having to use a rollator or a transport chair to get in and out of your house, or if you have like split level home or things like that, these come in all different sizes, fairly inexpensive. This is kind of similar to like having a portable ramp, but if the rise that you're trying to cover is not too tall, then this is an easy thing to put in place. On the left is kind of the Grand Mac Daddy power operated vehicle. POV is what Medicare calls that, or a power wheelchair. I just picked a brand off the website that would be a good demonstration for you. But this is one of those that tilts, it reclines, it can change with you. And so you see it has a hand drive on there, but most of these, if spec'd out correctly, can be something that you can change the position of the drive. You can use different kinds of adaptability in order to be able to drive it in different ways, depending on what your greater strengths are. And so that is a $30,000 machine. Most insurance companies will pay for a large portion of something like this every 5 years. And so that's part of the reason we give this information at the beginning, is you may decide that you really would love a scooter. You're doing okay getting around, but like endurance wise, you want to be able to go places. And so if you use your insurance benefits for that scooter, and then in 2 or 3 years, you need something that you can sit in all day, that will give you support for your trunk and your head and neck. This is the power wheelchair you would need, and you would have already used up that benefit. And so that's part of the reason we kind of jump to the end. And I always just give people that warning, and make sure that you're not using a benefit in the beginning that you may want further down the road. And then this is bath equipment, shower equipment. I know that Teresa will refer to some of these items. These are, again, this is kind of the more expensive end. And just a little caveat here, most of your clinics and physicians and also have loaner closets. And so there are places to ask your therapist if they can help you get a hold of a piece of equipment that's been used and then is no longer needed. And so top right corner, this is kind of a tub transfer vent. It's just a little fancier than some of them, but if you can't scoot your bottom over, and this goes over a bathtub, kind of over one edge of it, and that seat pivots. And so if you can transfer, stand and get into that seat, and then somebody can help you lift your legs over and then slide you into a tub, that's something that I've seen folks use just to limit having to do modifications in the beginning. And then the other two are different products. As you can see that they tilt. And so if you need to shower and use a Hoyer, which I'll show you a picture of that in a minute, these are options for that. And these also would go right over the toilet. And so you could use it in that way as well. All right, and this is the last real quick slide here. A lot of folks will need either a bedside commode or something to go over their toilet. And so on the left is a padded drop arm commode seat. I recommend these from the beginning. They're adjustable, and so the legs on it can be raised. And so if you are taller, or you even if you have a handicap height toilet in your home, these can be raised to give you a little bit more height, making it easier for you to get on and off of. The armrests are on it, but they also will flip down. The backrest can be removed, so you can position it over your toilet and you remove that bucket. And then if at some point, say you're getting up in the middle of the night, rather than having to get up and either walk or transfer to a chair, this can be your bedside commode as well. And so this, again, this is one of those pieces of equipment that's a little more expensive in the beginning, but it is more comfortable, and it's probably going to last you a lot longer than some other items that you might see kind of at your Walgreens or CVS or Walmart as far as toileting equipment. And then PTs also will be a part of conversations about adjustable beds. And so as you lose the ability to turn yourself or adjust at night, or even as your respiratory status changes and you need to sleep elevated, a lot of folks will look into having an adjustable bed, more comfortable and usually more adjustable than, say, a hospital bed. And then in transfers, so to the right are transfer boards. That happens to be my favorite brand right there. And this is something that you can, so if you can no longer stand, but you've got a caregiver that can help you slide, or your arms may be super functional at that point, but you just cannot put weight on your legs or use strength to stand, and you can use a board to put kind of under your thigh and slide over from bed to wheelchair or wheelchair to recliner or whatever it might be for you. And then on the left is the Hoyer lift. And so if you're needing somebody to lift you, this kind of takes the burden off the caregiver, but makes it super safe. And you can use that lift to get in and out of most things: bed, shower chair, onto the sofa. It's very versatile. And those are usually in the loaner closet as well. Okay. Hopefully I didn't go too long. Any questions?
All right, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat box. We'll wait just a few minutes to see if anyone has any questions before moving on. All right, well, I think, oh, here we go. From Veronica, she said, I know you said moderate exercises, but what about Pilates for range of motion?
So again, a lot of this depends on what your function is. And so I would suggest asking whoever your therapist is in your clinic. Pilates is a good option. I've had a number of people that in the beginning continue to do Pilates. It is great for stretching and, like we talked about, joint range of motion. It is using, typically, my understanding is your own body weight, and so you're not adding a resistive weighted component.
Great. And from Sharon, tell us more about bed options, please.
So I would ask the vendor that you work with. That one that I showed you is called a Leggett and Platt, and I've had a number of folks who have chosen that. Like they will replace their master bed, and you can get those with, you know, two twins side by side, so that both, you know, you and your patient or your spouse, whatever it is, can make your own adjustments on either side. But there are a number of brands. Those are not paid for by insurance. So something you just need to do a little bit of research on and ask around and see what people have found to be best.
Got a few more questions here from Rebecca, or excuse me, from Diana. Very helpful info. Thanks, Kristen. From Rebecca, talk to us about massage therapy.
Hi, Rebecca. I know you. So a lot of folks have found massage therapy to be helpful. Some of it depends on kind of your variation of ALS. If you've got the kind where your muscles are more spastic and they kind of tighten on their own, or if you're, just tense person, you find a lot of your stress and your is carried in your shoulders. A lot of folks have found massage to be super helpful. And if your caregiver can kind of do some of that massage, especially if you're needing, if your legs are no longer, you're not able to move them on your own, and so they're going to be the ones stretching them. Gentle massage while they're doing that is really helpful. It does tend to give, it just gives kind of a pain relief for a lot of folks.
Great. Let's see. From Diana, Pilates, great for the caregiver. Thank you, Diana. From Lynn, what if you almost completely lose the ability to use your hands and arms, but can still walk? Bad variant of ALS. Suggestions?
So a lot of times, if that's the case, I would say walking with somebody kind of nearby or with a gait belt on. A lot of times we'll recommend having what we call a gait belt, just something somebody can hold on to so that you can still use your leg muscles. We want to, there is a component of use it or lose it. But I would say we typically will recommend a power wheelchair a little earlier. And just like reminder, like because we recommend a power chair doesn't mean you have to get up every morning and get in that power chair. But if you want to go on a walk with your family and you're going to be on, up and down curbs and in the street or on the sidewalks where, one little bump in the sidewalk may cause you to lose your balance. Instead, you could hop in your power chair and go for a walk in the evenings and not risk a fall. So if you can still walk with somebody there walking, or if a lot of people feel comfortable in their homes, most therapists wouldn't say keep walking, but we know, we're not crazy. We know what goes on.
I might add a little bit of something, sorry. I'm Teresa. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So one thing that if you do want to continue walking just from an upper extremity standpoint, wearing a jacket with pockets so that you can put your hands in your pockets to reduce the amount of pull and weight pulling on the shoulders will help to minimize some of the shoulder pain that just dangling arms might contribute to. So just
Agreed.
Thank you. Another question, and then we have a clarification on that from Sharon. Can you advise caregivers on the best way to transfer or pick up from the floor, etc.? And then Steve has a clarification saying, what are your suggestions for mechanical lift when carpet is present?
So from the floor, again, frequently we will recommend folks getting a Hoyer lift to have just in case and to be trained on how to get somebody up off the floor. The other recommendation, and I tell people this all the time, if you know where the fire station is closest to your house, I tell people to bake some cookies, go down there, introduce yourself, let them know what your situation is, so that if you have somebody fall and they're not injured, but you just can't get them up, ask them what number to call, and they don't have to bring out the hook and ladder and all the sirens, and yet they can send somebody that can help you get your loved one off the floor. But the Hoyer is the way that we would train somebody to be able to do that safely. And then the lift on carpet is tricky. It's It's not easy to do. A lot of times I have recommended that folks get the plastic mats that you would put under your workspace when you have a rolling chair. I've seen people purchase those fairly inexpensive and just set them up kind of underneath your bed, if that's where you're using the Hoyer, and good old duct tape them together. It makes it a little bit easier, but carpet is super difficult.
From Diana, any suggestions for muscle spasms in your back, heat or warm packs? Are those okay?
Yeah, if you're talking about kind of your general, like I've pulled a tight muscle type spasm, then heat, if you're able to take an Advil or something like that, that's typically what's recommended. Sometimes those spasms are more of the kind of the neurological spasm, and heat may help with that. But that would probably be something that if it continues for long, I would ask your physician.
Great. Lynn is asking, how does funding work for secondary power wheelchair bracket add-ons like head, speech synthesis, and eye gaze?
I would ask the vendor that you work with. Some of that can get approved, an OT and Teresa may be able to speak to this as well. Sometimes we can write a letter of recommendation or medical necessity, and some of those things can get approved. A lot of times, if they're not done a specific way or depending on your insurance, it may or may not be approved.
Jerry asks, the past 2 weeks I've been unable to rise to a stand from my recliner. What do you suggest? I use a walker slowly.
So if you've found recently that it's hard to get from sit to stand from your recliner, sometimes I'll recommend that people will use either a cushion. So you can buy, at Bed Bath & Beyond or Walmart, just a foam cushion. So that would give you another inch or inch and a half and might make it a little bit easier for the time being to be able to get up. Some people will go and switch from your recliner to a lift chair that would actually help you to go to standing. Is another option.
And then we have one more question from Dutch. I find myself struggling, a couple questions. I find myself struggling between 1, safety, and 2, if I use an assistive device, will I lose muscle strength? I know safety comes first, but I want to be able to do whatever I can safely to maintain some independence.
Yes, and that is, I think that's a fine line, and that's kind of the discussion we have with our patients. We know, like I said, there is a use it or lose it in some respects. It's hard to figure out what is, ALS just taking a toll and what is, I'm not safe and I can't do the same amount that I was doing. So I would say one, kind of like a lot of times, keep kind of a log of when are my good times. And so if I wake up in the morning and I get ready, I know I've got enough energy and my muscles are kind of at their best. And so do a little bit of walking then, or if like right before bed, it helps me to do some walking so that I'm kind of stretched out and I've used some of those muscles. And then I would say if you are feeling weak at different points of the day, just to be safe, have somebody with you or to make sure that if you stumble or lose your balance, that they can help you.
And then a follow-up question from Lynn. When you can't use your arms at all but can walk, are there shoulder braces or arm slings that would be recommended to help pull your shoulders back?
I'll let Teresa answer that. I bet she has a good answer.
Yes, sorry, I didn't read the full question. To help pull your shoulders back and reduce weight or pull, in addition to jackets with pockets.
Yeah, so they do have slings. Some of them are very cumbersome to put on, especially if you don't have someone helping you. If it involves both arms and both shoulders, then you would want something for both of them. If you don't want a jacket, then you can try putting your hands in your pockets of your pants. You just want something to support the weight of, at least part of the weight of the arm as you're walking. So you don't want any jerking. So you don't want your arms to be swinging either too much, because that increases the amount of pull on the shoulders. You can use a regular arm sling, like the kind that you can get at the grocery store or at Walgreens, CVS. I wouldn't encourage that typically because you can't really use your hands very much while you're wearing that, and it encourages an internally rotated arm position. So if it's just for short-term periods when you're out walking the neighborhood or something like that, that would be okay, but preferably not for long-term.
Great, thank you. I believe that's all the questions we have. So Teresa, I believe you're up to talk to us about occupational therapy and ALS.
Great. So I am Teresa. I am an occupational therapist. I have been an OT for about 35 years. I originally started working in the ALS clinic out of St. David's, Round Rock with Dr. Corbett. Did that for about 10 years, and then later with Baylor Scott and White in Round Rock. So I don't know how many of you know what OT is, but it's a pretty broad field. We deal, as far as ALS goes, we deal mostly with ADLs. If you don't know what an ADL is, it's basically anything that you occupy yourself with, any kind of an activity that you do throughout your day, whether it's feeding yourself, dressing, going to the bathroom, cleaning yourself up after you go to the bathroom, getting yourself from one surface to another, showering, etc., as well as spending time with your family and doing the things that you need to do in order to participate with that, whether it's picking up your grandchild or just spending quality time with your family. So we cover quite a broad area of those types of things. One of the main things that always in the back of our mind, we want to try to prioritize our activities to try to figure out what's most important for us to maintain. A lot of people like to maintain their independence in toileting because that's a very private activity and a little bit more invasive when someone has to help you get cleaned up. Bathing as well for the same reason. So good to really kind of set in your head what your priorities might be so that you can, when it comes time that you need to trim back your activities, that you know what you want to delegate to somebody else as opposed to maintaining those activities. Sometimes people will get really fatigued, and if you're really fatigued by the end of the day, maybe you give up that morning dressing and have someone help you with the dressing in the morning so that you end up having more energy by the end of the day. That type of thing. And always too, we want to keep that safety in the back of our heads with everything that we do, as Kristen mentioned. Safe technique while you're moving around your house, in and out of your bed, as well as just moving around the furniture in your living room. So you may even consider just modifying the layout of your home to allow for better access, whether it's from a wheelchair or with a walker, just so that you don't have as much clutter around and you have good lighting in the house as well. So a big part of OT's approach is to minimize pain and work with fine motor coordination especially, but also to use tools that you might need to help you maintain more independence for just a little bit longer than you would without it. So I'll just kind of jump right into more of the activities of daily living. Eating, feeding yourself typically is something that we do every day, unless you're on tube feeds. When you eat, sometimes it can be difficult. In general, when you hold a utensil, pretend that this is a utensil. If you hold a utensil, it's going to be easier to hold something if it's a little bit fatter. If I'm holding this and I have an open hand this way, I don't have to exert as much force on it to hold on to it. But if I have to close my hand all the way or even hold you with my fingers, then I'm going to have a lot more strength and more coordination. I think that we have a picture of a spoon.
Yeah, I'm going to talk so I get big. Maybe I'll get big. So these are the different utensils. You can see that the handles are bigger. Cool thing about these is that they bend. You can see that pretty easily. Which changes the dynamic of how you can eat.
Yeah, so when you bend the bowl or the tines of the utensil, it minimizes the need to lift your entire arm to get the spoon to your face, so that you can just use your elbow with your arm at your side. So that comes in handy. And some of them, I mean, usually they're dishwasher safe and pretty hardy, relatively inexpensive, kind of a good tool to consider. The other thing that we use sometimes is foam tubing, sort of for the same purpose. You can get commercially made foam tubing, different variety of different diameters on the external part, and also a different diameter on the center part. So if you have a spoon that you use at home, you can use the tubing to insert the fork or the spoon or whatever into the tubing to give you a bigger handle to hold on to so that you can get it up to your mouth a little bit easier, or hold on to it a little easier. The tubing can also be used for other things. If you like to crochet, I've had people use the smaller tubing and insert the crochet hook into the end of it and use it that way so that they can manipulate it a little bit easier. It just makes it a little bit bigger. So we'll talk about that. So that's kind of a principle that we use throughout a lot of different things, just to help our hands do their job a little bit better and a little bit easier without as much manipulation, the need for manipulation. The other thing that you can use that comes in really helpful or handy when you're eating is to get what they call a scoop dish. So it's a dish, and there are a whole bunch of different types of things that you can use. But there's a dish, and it has one side that has a lip that comes up and around, and sometimes it's just a lip that goes on the side of the plate, so that you can scoop. As you're scooping your food, you can scoop into the edge of it, and it doesn't fly off of the edge of the plate. That comes in pretty handy sometimes. The other thing, sometimes people have trouble with their plate scooting around too much on their tray or on the table, and you can use either a rubberized placemat, but there's also a material called Dyson, and I've included that in one of the handouts that we'll email later. But it's just a sheet of kind of rubbery silicone type material, and it's super, super tacky. The great thing about it, it's more tacky than those little rubber grippers that you can use, and it maintains its tackiness almost forever. So if it gets dusty or something like that, seems like it's not really that sticky anymore, you can just rinse it under the faucet and let it air dry, and it will renew its tack. So lasts almost forever, as long as you don't put some kind of chemical solution on it. So the next thing we could talk about is grooming and hygiene. So this involves, brushing your hair, brushing your teeth, shaving your legs, shaving your face, that kind of thing. So along the lines of using something that's a larger diameter, if you use an electric toothbrush that has a bigger handle, and it doesn't have to be something that is super expensive. This is Sonicare, but it's a little bit bigger. So when I'm using it, I use it this way instead of having to hold it with my fingers and manipulate it as much. The electric version will do the work for you, so that you don't, all you have to do is just get it there. So that works pretty well. The other thing is an electric razor. You can use an electric razor because you have to hold on to something bigger and you don't have to use your fingers as much. Other thing that you can use, this is made for ladies, but men can use them too. It's a Venus razor. If you can see, the green part is kind of a silicone material, and as is the blue, but it's got a nice flat area here and a contoured spot here, so that when I'm holding it, I can rest it, and it helps me hold on to it because my hands are going to be wet, and you can just reach and manipulate it a little bit easier without dropping it.
Teresa, I have a few questions from our participants. One from Jerry: where do you get those cool utensils?
You can order them, and I put some links on an addendum, I guess you would call it, that will be emailed after this presentation. I use a company called Functional Solutions through North Coast Medical, just because I usually like their materials. But this is it here. This is their catalog, and they have all sorts of different cool things in there. And this is the picture that shows the kind that I like the most. They also make, so they have some that's called good grips. Anytime you see good grips, it's gonna be something that's easier to hold on to and easier on your hands. So if you do go to this website, you have to use a little bit of caution because there are two versions. There's this version, and then there's the other version here. One is weighted, which you don't want, and the other is not. You can also see on this page, this right here, it's called a buddy strap, if I'm not mistaken, and it fits around the handle of the enlarged utensils, the ones with the built-up handle, and it's just an elastic strap. So you put it on one loop first and then the other, and it's removable. But then you can stick your hand in it just like this, so that you don't have to work as hard to hold on to the utensil. And you can see in this picture, the bowl of the utensil has been bent so that they don't have to raise their elbow to get the spoon to their mouth.
Perfect. A couple more questions here. Can you give recommendations on brushing my teeth? I'm using an electric toothbrush, but it's getting more difficult to do this on my own. Any tips? And that's from Rebecca. And then also Jerry, related to this, says, I find it hard to turn on the electric toothbrush, and I have the one you showed.
I would try different versions of it. They have some, even oh gosh, I'm not going to be able to think about it. There's one that you can get at CVS or Walgreens. I would just go and play with them a little bit if you can. I know that's hard right now, but you may try, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show this on here. So if this is the countertop, if you take the button and just press it into the countertop to activate it and turn it off, that might work, just so that you don't have to press with your thumb. And as far as, what was the other question? Getting more difficult. So the other thing that helps a lot of times is if you pull up a chair to the countertop and do your washing your face, brushing your teeth, and all that stuff from sitting down, one, that will help you to conserve energy, and you won't have to bend over and to reach the sink quite as much. If your arm is getting fatigued, if you rest your elbow on the countertop, you'll have a little bit better access to your mouth because it'll get you about that height. That would be probably the easiest thing to do. Sometimes people have trouble with flossing if you're a flosser. I don't have a flosser handy. They used to make, I'm not sure if they do make it, but you can get the little toothpick flossers. Those are hard to hold on to. But they make one from Reach, the Reach brand, and I like it because it is kind of contoured, sort of like this, but it has a little prong thing with the floss on it, so you can just stick it in your mouth, hook it down, and do your flossing that way. They also make, I think, Waterpik makes some that are flossers and brushers. It just squirts water through in between the teeth to help to improve your hygiene that way. Mounting the electric toothbrush to make it stationary. You could do that. You can also try one of those straps, like a buddy strap from the catalog that I showed you. Hooking that on there, if you hooked it here to here so that the strap went around the back side of your hand, that would hold it in your hand a little bit better. You just would have to turn it in your hand so that it was, so that the bristles were facing the correct direction. That way.
Lynn added something onto that. She said her person with ALS cannot lift hands at all.
Okay, so I would have the caregiver do it, perhaps, if you have availability to that, to somebody to help you with that, or use a good mouthwash to help with that. I suppose you could try to mount a toothbrush on the countertop, but that would require a lot of extra body motion. And I find that that fatigues people a little bit quicker when you have to use extra motions, and it sometimes can cause irritation in neck muscles and shoulder muscles as well. Any other questions? Good. All right, so we'll move on to toileting. So in the bathroom, I really liked some of the devices and the bedside commode, and I really like that that Kristen showed. I like the drop arm on the bedside commode because it really does make a big difference in ease of getting onto and safety, getting on and off of it. Another thing that sometimes people will have difficulty with is moving their clothing out of the way while they're going to sit or stand up or getting cleaned up. So using a large hair clip, like one of those big claw clips, this is not a large one, but you might be able to kind of see it. But just to use it to clip the fabric together, and this is not where I would put it, but just to show you how it would be used. But if you just bunch even just take your shirt and bunch it up in the front and clamp it with this to hold it up out of the way. Sometimes people, if it's bigger, it will hold a lot more material than this little one would. But sometimes women in particular will wear a skirt so that it's a little bit less stuff to deal with. You can tuck the bottom of the skirt up into the waistband of the skirt to kind of get it out of the way. Same thing with the shirt tail. You can kind of put it up and in the top part of your shirt to just so that it's not in the way and gonna get wet or dirty or soiled. So so that's that. The other thing that you could use, like if you're using a bedside commode over the toilet, the raised toilet seat to accommodate, to make it a little bit easier to get up off of, and also the armrests, if you are able to use those, provide a little bit better balance and safety so that you're in the middle. The other thing that people use a lot is, not a lot, but sometimes they come in very handy, is a bidet. It sounds very eccentric, but it's very useful. They make one that's called a Washlet. Toto is a brand that has very good products, a variety of some that are Cadillac versions that have every bell and whistle attached to them. You can get them with a heated seat. You can use heated water or not. You can, a lot of them have a blow dryer on them to dry, because skin hygiene, especially on the bottom when you're sitting on it, you don't want it to stay moist or soiled, so that you don't get skin breakdown. But the only thing that they require, so the washlet, the difference, so the bidet is like a freestanding unit, a whole toilet, so to speak. And the washlet is just the top part. So it's kind of like a toilet seat, the seat part that sits on top of the commode, where the toilet seat normally would sit. And then it has, like, along the side, it has the controls, so little buttons that you can push. Some of them have a little remote control so that a helper can push the buttons for you if you can't push the buttons, and that can be mounted on the wall. I like, if you're going to be using it independently, I like the buttons along the side so that they're easier access, so you don't have to reach over to get them. But that can be very handy. And then a lot of times people ask about handrails in the toilet room, and handrails are only good if you can actually reach and grab them with enough force to be safe. So if you are having some arm weakness or hand weakness, a grab bar is not really going to do you as much good, unless your caregiver is using it for something. So there's that. And as far as dressing goes, dressing top part, bottom part, all parts. There are a couple of websites that I have included on the addendum that will go out. One is Buck and Buck. It sells adapted clothing, and Silverts is the other one that I like. They have Velcro clothing, where they, instead of buttons down the front of a shirt or a blouse, it's Velcro. So you just Velcro them closed, and then to open them, you can just rip them open a little bit quicker. And then they have some elastic waist clothing and trousers, jeans, slacks, that kind of thing, to some with and some without Velcro. They have some that have a Velcro, just the Velcro fly, and others that are more, they have pockets, and within the waistband at the pocket is hidden a Velcro strip so that it opens on both sides, and you can, it's easier access. Those are nice if you're in a wheelchair, especially, because then the whole front part of the pants can be folded down so that you have a little bit better access if you're using a urinal or something like that. So that's about it on dressing. Simple is better. Pull-on clothing is going to be easier to get on and off. A lot of times people go without underwear just because it's a little bit easier. It's one less clothing item to remove when you are in a hurry and don't have much time. So something to think about, something to consider. As far as the bath, the shower goes, I really liked the versions of the shower chairs that Kristen showed you. I like the cutout on the bottom, because one other thing that I usually recommend is a handheld shower. So if they're relatively inexpensive, you can get them at Target or Home Depot, and they're really easy to install. You just unscrew the regular shower head and put that one on. Some of them even come with a little wall mount nozzle holder so that it's at a good height for you and you can reach it a little bit better. But I like the cutout in the shower chairs so that you can rinse off and get all parts down below without having to stand up, sit down to rinse really good. So that's good. And again, handrails only if they are, if you have enough arm and hand strength to benefit from those. Optimal shower setup would be a roll-in shower so that you don't have to step over, and you can just have a wheeled shower chair and just roll straight in. And the reclining chair is good too, just for fatigue and all that. So and onto the kitchen. So when you're working in the kitchen, you want to, safety is always number one, always, but especially in the kitchen, because you don't want to be dropping plates and then stepping in the glass or cutting yourself in any way. So one of the things, you want to minimize the amount of pinching that you do, just because that typically gets weak very quickly. So sliding things across, sliding dishes, casserole dishes, or whatever you've got that you're doing, sliding things across the countertop will keep you from grabbing it and carrying it from one place to another. So if you just slide it across the countertop does the work for you. So that's kind of the idea with a lot of this, is that let the tool do the work for you, and then your body doesn't have to take the stress and strain in the workload. So also using a rolling cart, sometimes when, like if you're carrying your dishes, your plates from the kitchen to the table, you don't want to be loading up both hands, because then you've got both hands and you've got to use your hands, and if it's hot, then you risk dropping it. So if you use a cart that has wheels on the bottom, then you can just roll the whole cart over to the table and then unload using both hands together to do that. The only recommendation, a lot of times those carts are a little bit lightweight, and so I would recommend weighting it with something, whether it's books or dishes or anything that's heavy down below, just to give it a little bit more stability. And again, the larger wheels are going to be a lot more stable instead of those little teeny tiny wheels, and they'll go over bumps and tile and that sort of thing a lot easier than the smaller wheels will. The other thing I usually recommend just leaving those commonly used items out on the countertop, so that you're not bending and stooping and reaching as frequently into the cabinets. I have a habit of using the same things over and over again, so that's pretty easy to do for me. The other thing is to use plastic or like a Corelle type dish, that if you do drop it, it's not going to break. You can use plastic ones, or the melamine, the outdoor type dishes, plates and bowls and that kind of thing, that they're pretty durable and sometimes fancy and sometimes not. So the other thing that I like to recommend is that people use a scissor like this. This is called a loop scissor, and you can see it has a loop on the end here. And what that loop does is that when you close it, I would use not my fingers like I almost did, because those muscles are smaller and more inefficient. But if you just put it in your palm this way and close and open this way, you can use it to open packages in the kitchen. And sometimes that can be difficult if you're just trying to use your fingers. But that gets you into the packages a lot easier and a lot quicker. They come in different types. This is the long pointy version. They also have some that are a little bit shorter that have a blunt tip on them. But I like the one that doesn't have, they have one that has loops, like finger loops. Sorry, I'm too close to my screen. They have one that has finger loops, but when you use regular scissors, I thought I had some here, but when you use regular scissors, it's a lot of thumb. They're powered just with the fingers and the thumb. So that's why I like this. Without the loops, it's just the whole hand opening and closing. So you're using the long flexors of the finger, and the thumb is not really involved, just for stability a little bit there. Anytime you can, you want to be seated to save energy. So if you're doing a lot of chopping or something, you might bring your things over the kitchen table and sit at the table to chop things up. And you can also use the dice on one of those sticky sheets underneath your bowl. If you're mixing, you can stick the sheet underneath it so that it doesn't slide around, and you don't have to stabilize it with the other hand quite as hard. You still need to use both hands, but not as much. Saves the work. So that's it for that. As far as, no, they won't. So I'm looking at the question. The question is, will Medicare or private insurance pay for any of these OT devices? And most of the time not. It's one of those personal care things that they don't like to pay for. So I wouldn't go real crazy with it, but there might be one activity or two that you really, really want to continue being able to perform. And one of these devices may be helpful for that. So I'm seeing another comment here. Carhartt is a brand of shirts. They have a line with snaps instead of buttons. Men's and women's on Amazon. That's good to know. Yeah, snaps can be difficult sometimes depending on the snap, just because it requires more pinch force. But if they're a little bit more on the loose side, so sometimes cheaper is better maybe. I'm not real sure but if the cheaper ones are easier, but sometimes if they're a little bit more broken in, then they will fasten a little bit better. And Lynn says there's also a company that uses magnets. I don't know of that company, but that would be good to look for. Yeah, and also if you know somebody that's a seamstress, converting a regular shirt to one that has Velcro is relatively easy if you're a seamstress and you know what you're doing. You just remove the button, attach it to the buttonhole on the outside part of the shirt on the placket, and then turn it over and attach a dot of Velcro there and a dot on the opposite side where the buttons are normally attached. So, yeah, so driving. If you're still able to drive, safety is always number one. Make sure that you're able to control your car with 100% safety. As much as you were able to before. Some people are not just safe drivers, but so always safety first. But one of the things that comes in handy if you just have a little bit of weak grip or weak arms even, this is a steering wheel cover that fits over the steering wheel. So it just opens this way. It's made of silicone, and that's why I like this one, because it's a little bit tacky. I can hold on to it without even really holding on to it. So when you're turning, you can use the palm of your hand to turn. That the driver's safety people might not tell you to do that, but it just makes it a lot easier to hold on to it and easier to manipulate it. I know the cover on my steering wheel is one of those leather wrapped ones, and it's real slippery. So I got this, and it makes it a lot easier. The other thing that it helps with is that it makes it thicker. So instead of having to hold this way onto the steering wheel, I can hold in a more relaxed position with my hand more open, and it requires less force. So this does part of the work for you. I see from Catherine, there's a company called Magnaready brand and Zappos. Zappos.com//adaptive. That's good to know. It's good information. All right, and then for outdoor activities like doing yard work and that sort of thing, if you're still involved in that, using good tools that will do the work for you is your best bet. Using two hands to grab things instead of just grabbing hold of something this way. You want to use your arms to pick up things. And use a rolling cart, use a wagon, or there's a cart that's called a gorilla cart that is like a wagon. It's a combination of a wheelbarrow and a wagon. And the nice thing about it is that it has a lever on the front side that pulls, and you can use it as a dump truck. So it helps to do part of the carrying, heavy lifting. Useful in other ways too around the house, just to help to move things from one place to another. So that's it on the ADLs in general. There are a million different tools. And like I said, you don't want to go crazy with buying this tool, that tool, because it can add up to quite a bit. But if you have one tool that is kind of a multitasker, then it's good to maybe invest in something like that. But just follow the general principle of using both hands together if you can, and enlarging the grips when you possibly can to reduce the load on your hands. There are some splints that we use sometimes to help to support. Really commonly we see weakness in the thumb relatively early on for some people. So when that happens, you can use either a custom fabricated splint. This is a custom fabricated one. And it just supports, it fits on the palm of the hand. I like this version. There's another style that goes kind of on this side and not so much all across the palm. But this just gives a good rigid support to that thumb so that you can pinch. You can make it a little bit longer so that it gives a little bit more, and you're just using the long finger flexor this way. I can't move my thumb at all in this, so it's important that it be made. It's a custom made splint by an OT usually, or a PT depending on the clinic, and so they make it directly on your hand to fit you and your measurements and that sort of thing. So insurance will pay for something like this most times. Medicare will pay for that. This is another version that you can get at CVS or Walgreens or Walmart. HEB has them too. I like this one because it's comfortable. It's more comfortable than the other kind, but I like it too because it has these little laces here. They stay threaded, so all you have to do to cinch it in is pull and hook. It hooks to the fabric here, and this is just like a soft neoprene fuzzy material. It has an extra support on the thumb that you can wrap high to give you a little bit more stability at the tip so that you can still grab. The good and bad thing about this is that it's flexible, so I can move out of it if I have enough strength to do so. So it's not going to be as rigid as the other. So if I'm wanting to pull out of it, I can this way. But this is pretty inexpensive. I think I got this one at HEB for about $14. So, and it has these two stays on the outside that provide the support. It pulls the thumb in an outward position this way. So that works pretty good. Yeah, so in general, you want to practice, you know, when Kristen was talking, she mentioned fatigue is sometimes an issue. You want to practice energy conservation so that you're pacing your activities throughout the day, not just with exercise, but you want to try to balance everything. If you want to be able to go for a walk in the morning and then still be able to go to the grocery store or spend time with your grandkids or your kids or whoever, or your spouse. So just kind of plan your day so that you don't do too much all at once and kind of spread it all throughout the day and throughout the week, throughout the month, especially at holiday times that people have a tendency, we all have a tendency to do too much. And so if you have company coming in or something like that, try to plan way in advance and do as much of the work ahead of time to avoid as much as you can overdoing it and causing too much fatigue. So let me read your little comments here. Michael asks, what is it called? What is what called? What is what called? So clarify.
I think they meant the hand brace that you shared earlier.
So this one here, this is called a thumb spica, or a hand-based thumb orthosis. And then this is called thumb support, is what they labeled it on the box. This is a Futuro brand. This is my favorite. There are a million different types and versions of the same thing. But like I said, I really like this one mostly because it's just so easy to get on and cinched in quickly. So that, but it's Futura brand, and so it's made by 3M, and they also make Ace brand. So Ace is their brand as well. So you can find it in either Ace or Futura. Make this one. So yeah, brand of clothing. The brand of clothing there were just two websites. One is Buck and Buck, and that will be on the little reference sheet that you get afterwards, and also Silberts, SILBERTS.com. They offer clothing for men and women both, and in different styles. Some of them are just easy, relatively, they're just normal clothing that is a little bit easier to put on. Some of them are pretty extreme. Some of them, they even have pants that have a flap in the back instead of a full back side, so that you can use it when you're in a wheelchair without having to take the pants down. It just opens up the back side so that you can just sit on the commode or move that way. So, are there any other questions?
All right, well, if we don't have any more questions, then we'll just bring this to a close. Thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you so much, Kristen, for being here with us today. This presentation has been recorded, so we will send this recording to you with email address that you provided when you registered afterwards. Stay tuned for more information about our future upcoming virtual presentations and workshops. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And